UN estimates that between 1 and 2 million children worldwide are engaged in commercial sexual exploitation. What that means is things like child prostitution, child pornography, those just worst forms, most severe forms of human trafficking. And I don't know how many people here have read the book Little Sisters, but it provides a very, I'm not going to say accurate, it provides a tableau almost of what happens and why it happens around the world. And the truth is that while it looks different in different countries around the world, one very large factor that you don't see all the time, but very often it's most common, is just poverty. That if you go back 200 years in America's history, a slave could be bought for between $800 and $1,000, and that's 200 years ago. So that's the equivalent of like a mortgage for a house today. But in today's dollars, people are bought and sold for less than $300. And so human life has become just so cheap that in so many parts of the world where you have endemic poverty, where you have, from that video from the book, people who just live in these remote villages, they don't know about the outside world, they don't know about the dangers. It's very often that parents do sell their children to traffickers without realizing what they're doing, that they think that their children will go off to a school, will have a better life, an opportunity to be a house servant. And that just doesn't happen. So I would say that poverty is a leading factor in America because it's an underground criminal organization. We don't know the exact numbers, but studies have been done, and there are estimates that between 200 to 300,000 American children are at risk for commercial sexual exploitation. And the John Jay School of Criminal Justice did a study that found that there were just under 4,000 street youth in New York City engaging in survival sex, trading their bodies for money, for a place to sleep when it's cold out, when it's raining out, for food, that sort of thing. And just by looking at the methodology, we feel that that study is it's an underestimate, because it was really looking at people without pimps, without traffickers mostly, and that's just not the case.
Okay, somebody wish to add to that? Stuart?
Yeah, I can speak from my experience with this. When I first found out about this, it was in 1992, and I had no knowledge of this. I was totally innocent about this thing. And what happened was I started a meditation center in Kathmandu. In fact, I was starting them all over the world at that time. And some students of mine moved to Kathmandu. We started a center. It got very successful. And the incredible thing that happened was one of my students, Kristina Jones, the woman who was singing on the video, calls me up one day and says, "Stuart, I don't know what to do here. I love this place. It's really exotic. Most interesting place I've ever lived." I said, "Chris, don't worry about it. You're in one of the poorest countries in the world. Something is going to come along." 2 days later, she called me up again, and they had a meeting of the United Nations in Kathmandu, meeting with doctors and NGOs, and this whole problem was being discussed. We discovered at that time 250,000 children had already been sold into brothels in Mumbai or in Calcutta, Delhi, all over India. And I said to Chris, this has to be our work. We have to set up a safe house, and we have to work with doctors and NGOs and find these children before they're being sold, and then educate them, shelter them, clothe them. So we set up an organization called the Bahini Foundation. Poverty was the problem. Poverty. Dowry was the problem. At that time, the salary of a Nepalese peasant working in the hinterlands was $15 a year. When a child had to get married, a girl had to get married or she was a complete disgrace to the family. So what happened was a trafficker would come in and say, "I will give you $200 for your daughter." and they would sell the kids. People in some of these villages that literally, to marry off their daughters, put themselves, they became indentured servants for the rest of their lives to moneylenders. It was extraordinary. And I was like, I walked into this thing totally innocent, and that's how my book was written.